What can you learn about world literature from reading every single one of 120 winners of the Nobel Prize for Literature? What can you learn about world history? What can you learn about life? Because reading history, reading literature, after all, that's what it's really for, isn't it? To help you get along with your life. And has there ever been anyone who can say they've read every single winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature? Certainly before I began this little challenge that I'm doing on the Burning Archive YouTube channel, I'm Jeff Rich. I only read about, 40 odd of the Nobel Prizes for the winners of the Nobel Prize for Literature. But by October this year, I plan to have read every single one of the 120 winners and show you how you can do it too. I'm doing all the details of this incredible literary challenge, Ultimate Book Lovers Challenge, over at my Substack, jeffrich.substack.com. And in this video, I'm going to kind of introduce you to all of those 7 winners and point to you how you can read those people for free through various internet resources, which are really easy to get to. Well, relatively easy to get to. The winners I'm looking at this time in this video is the next writer, and again, there's a real theme here about sort of Germanic culture, I guess, and some of these early Nobels not being picked up by the English-speaking world in subsequent decades of all the conflicts that happened in World War I and World War II. But the next winner was not in 1918, because the last year of the war interrupted the Nobel Prize again, just as it had in 1914. But in 1919, this gentleman, Carl Spitteler from Switzerland, won the Nobel Prize, 1845 to 1924. And he was a Swiss poet and a grandee of classical European culture. But he was very much scarred by World War I. But there is an amazing story that even though he's largely forgotten today, he found his way into the collective unconscious of Western culture. By the time of the war, he was a leading intellectual in Switzerland in the sort of Belle Epoque period. But he found himself in a neutral Switzerland, but in a society that was divided between French speakers and German speakers. France and Germany, of course, being at war with each other in World War I. And Spitteler opposed the very pro-German attitude of the Swiss German-speaking majority in the Great War. His major poem was a poem called Olympian Spring. There, Carl Spitteler, and I'm not going to try to say the German, but I think it's Olympische Frühling, something like that. I don't speak German. I probably shouldn't have tried. Now, regrettably, given this particular poem, this epic verse poem, which you can see here, and if you can read German, you'll be able to enjoy a long, long poem. This whole book is the poem in many parts. So it's sort of like, I don't know, like Paradise Lost or something like that. This poem has not been translated into English so far as I can tell. There was a review in 1952 that described this poem as a neglected masterpiece, and by now I think we can say it's much more than neglected. It's a little bit forgotten. But if you do speak German, and surely there are many viewers of the channel out there who do speak German, you can check it out. And in my Substack article about the Nobels this week, I've got a link to that amazing poem for you to read. And I've also included in the Substack a poem from Carl Spitteler that has been translated into English called Another Waking. But the really fascinating bit, I think, is a little story about Carl Spitteler because, as I said, although he's been neglected and even forgotten entirely as a writer and a poet, he sort of made his way into the collective unconscious of Western culture. Collective unconscious, that was a term that Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, psychoanalyst of the early 20th century, Freud's sort of friend and then rival, the great talker about archetypes, the person who's deeply influenced someone like Jordan Peterson, Carl Gustav Jung. He wrote a book called Psychological Types that talked about, all these different types and used one of Carl Spitteler's poems, Prometheus and Epimetheus, from 1881 as the basis for some of that discussion. And indeed, Jung later claimed that the idea of the archetype of the animal was based on a conversation he had with his fellow Swiss intellectual, Carl Spitteler, who described to him my lady soul, his sort of inspiration in a way, muse. So there you go. Carl Spitteler, forgotten as a poet, his great Nobel Prize winning poem, not translated well into English, and his conversation with Jung deeply influencing modern psychology.